This video is made possible by donations to the United States Lighthouse Society from people like you.
Welcome, everyone. We haven't done any of these live Zoom events, I think, in at least a couple of months now, so it's nice to be back. Happy New Year, everyone. And those of you who've been sitting here for the last couple of minutes know that Jeff Gales, Executive Director of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, is with us today. Hi, Jeff. Hi. And for people who don't know, I'm Jeremy D'Entremont. I'm the historian for the U.S. Lighthouse Society and host of the Society's podcast, Lighthearted. We're going to have a really interesting presentation today. Before we start, I have just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, and this is really important, please be sure to keep your microphones muted for the entire event. If you're not sure about how to do that, and if you're not sure if you're muted, just look down at the lower left in your Zoom controls. There's a microphone icon. It should have a red line through it, meaning you're muted. If you're not muted, click on it so that you are. I think it looks like everybody except Dianne and me, are muted at this point. So we're all set. Only Dianne and I will be sharing our screens. I don't think anybody else would be able to do that, but please don't try to share your screens. And after Dianne speaks, we'll open it up for Q&A, and Jeff, you can help with that as well, of course. And you can ask questions in the chat. Just click on chat, and you get a chat window, and you can type in your question or comment there. We'll read them after Dianne's presentation. We'll also give instructions to take questions verbally when the time comes. But other than that, except when we call on you to ask a question, please don't unmute your mics. This event is being recorded. It will be posted within a few days on the U.S. Lighthouse Society YouTube channel. Please be aware that the video cannot be copied. The sounds, images, and content are copyrighted, so please be aware of that. At this point, Jeff, anything you want to say by way of greeting before I introduce Dianne?
Nope, let's get started.
Okay, sounds like a good idea. All right. So I'm now going to introduce Dianne Ballon. Dianne is a sound artist from Portland, Maine, and she received a Maine Artist Fellowship from the Maine Arts Commission. Her sound works have aired on National Public Radio's All Things Considered. Her recent exhibition, which you're going to hear about in a moment, featured her field recordings of Maine's working harbors, boatyards, and the sounding buoys of Casco Bay. From the Maine Maritime Museum's collection, she recorded the historical circa 1900 bells, whistles, and early foghorns. Her coastal sound work was featured in Yankee and Down East magazines and on several podcasts, Radio Maine, The Natural Curiosity Project, and, of course, Lighthearted, the podcast of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, which I host. I interviewed Dianne at the Maine Maritime Museum last spring, along with curator Catherine Sear. Dianne's field recording, Boats Creaking at a Dock in Iceland, was awarded at an international radio art competition. She produced audio for the national exhibition, The Marines and Tet, The Battle That Changed the Vietnam War. At Shenandoah National Park, she was awarded an artist in residency. At the National Audio Theater Festival, she produced radio theater. She produced audio for Tactile Images, a company that creates fine art for museums that is accessible to the blind through touch and sound. And at the University of Maine at Augusta, she taught audio production and radio theater. Currently, she teaches audio through the Maine College of Art and Design, SALT Institute for Documentary Studies. So I've known Dianne for a few years. We actually made contact back in the spring of 2021. Dianne, I looked it up, our first emails, that's when they were. You were working on recordings of foghorns at that point, and Dianne asked me for tips on recording some of the foghorns, and maybe Dianne, you'll be saying a little bit about that in your presentation. Then, of course, we met last spring at the Maine Maritime Museum in Bath to record the podcast interview. And that day, I had a chance to take in Dianne's exhibit on the sounds of the Maine coast at the museum, and I absolutely loved it. And that brings us to where we are today. So, Dianne, if you're ready, I think we're ready for you to go ahead and share your screen, so you can take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy. Jeremy, can you put me on speaker? Because I'm seeing you and not myself.
I think that's your view. If you go to speaker view on the upper right under views.
Yeah, I actually did that.
Let me mute myself.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, that's fine. Are you seeing me full screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I will talk to you then. Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming. I am Dianne Ballon, and I have been producing sound for over 35 years. My Maine Maritime Museum exhibit, Lost and Found, was on exhibit for almost a full year, ending on December 1st. I'll be taking you through some of the sounds and some of the stories behind the sounds from the exhibition. This is the title slide of the exhibit, actually, and it's a wonderful image created by Maine Maritime Museum for the exhibit of a navigational bell buoy. This was the entrance to the gallery. 2 video screens played back sound openly in real time with a visual of the sound waves. This nautical map shows the location of the sounding buoys that I actually recorded by having a boat me out to the buoys. So I recorded them from the water. And you can also see more of a close-up of the video screen with the sound waves. This is called a sound dome, which is a directional sort of playback system, and it's best heard by standing directly underneath it. I actually mixed the sounds. Many of the sounds were playing openly in the gallery, and I had to mix them so that one did not sort of overwhelm the other. And handsets were also used to play back audio. All sound recordings were represented by a visual graphic of the sound waves. So on the right, you can see 3 recordings, which are the early foghorns that I recorded. Here's my setup when attempting to record the foghorn at Portland Head Light in Cape Elizabeth. I go to great lengths to record pristine sound without other sounds getting in the way. This includes recording at sunrise, the most optimal time. To record the iconic sound of the foghorn at Portland Head Light, I needed a foggy morning, a high tide for the waves, and calm conditions so the wind would not hit the microphone. The foghorn I expected to hear did not sound. At one point, I thought I heard a foghorn in the distance, which I now know to be the whistle buoy. So foghorns have been converted to a new system known as the Mariner Radio Activated Sound System, or MRAS. This allows mariners to turn on the sound of the foghorn by connecting to the foghorn via radio. Foghorns no longer automatically sound on a foggy day. We have lost that sound. So I called the Coast Guard to get an accurate list of all the foghorns that have been converted. I was sent a 455-page government document. It contained a list of light sound signals buoys, day beacons, and other aids to navigation. The dock had a terrible search engine, a double set of page numbers, and needed to be updated weekly. Then through Maine Historical Society, I found a lighthouse historian, which is how I met Jeremy. And he told me that somebody at Portland Head Light, from time to time, someone had a radio and they would turn on the sound of the foghorn for the visitors. So I asked the Lighthouse Museum director to borrow her radio, and on a clear day, I went to record the sound of the foghorn. So mind you, I recorded this on a clear day, so I turned on the sound of the foghorn with the radio, and here's the recording. This is a program that I use to edit audio and also to clean up audio, my audio recordings. This is a stereo recording. This is the left channel on the top and the right channel on the bottom, and the height of the sound waves indicates how loud or soft the sound is playing. What was interesting was that when I returned home and listened to the recording, I was struck by how a more distant recording of the foghorn is more like our collective memory of it. So here's the foghorn as recorded from a distance. And now back to the bell buoy. Just a moment. Here's a beautiful shot of the bell buoy that I recorded from out on the water. This is Portland Harbor, Maine Approach Lighted Bell Buoy 12. You can see Portland Head Light in the distance, and a nice detail of the bell and the strikers. In all the times I've been to the lighthouse, and I'm there just about every week, from where I am standing on shore, I can see and hear this bell buoy, but the sound of the bell buoy changes. Sometimes it rings loud and clear, at other times I can barely hear it, and that's the elusiveness of sound. The navigational sounding buoys. After years of listening to and recording navigational bell buoys from the shore, I had the idea to record them from out on the water. While searching for bell buoys in Casco Bay, I discovered that there are 3 kinds of sounding buoys: the bell buoy, the gong buoy, and the whistle buoy. Each buoy creates sound by the motion of the water and the wind. And I'll play for you that red bell buoy. Here's that beautiful red bell buoy as recorded from out on the water. We left from Port Harbor Marina in South Portland. My captain announces our location.
We are located near Portland Harbor, Maine, approach lighted bell buoy 12.
Isn't that beautiful? The gong buoy is made up of 3 metal plates that, when struck, ring 3 different tones. The tones create a wonderful raw melody that is heard 3 times. Here is Willard Rock Lighted Gong Buoy 7. The whistle buoy is made of a metal pipe. The motion of the water rising and falling in the pipe creates a deep and foreboding sound like a foghorn. Here's Pine Tree Ledge Lighted Whistle Buoy 8. Recording the objects. Initially, I thought it'd be nice to have objects from the museum's collection as part of the exhibit, like an old skiff. So when I searched the collection, there were many, many skiffs. Then I thought, would the museum have any foghorns? And to my absolute astonishment, not one but several foghorns came up. That's when I had the idea to record them. In all the adventure of finding the objects to record, I forgot that they may be too fragile to make a sound. Once the museum checked out the objects, I scheduled several trips in order to record them. Here are all the objects waiting for me. When I arrived, all the objects, which I only knew through photographs, were set out before me, usually on 2 carts. To finally meet the objects in person took my breath away. In working with the sounds from the museum's collection, I am struck by how evocative they are. The toot-toot of the little giant foghorn, a small sound with a big name, brings the toot of a train whistle. The ding-ding from the tugboat Seguin signals the start of a boxing match and brings forth the arrival and departure of the old streetcars of Boston. And instead of the gorgeous, melancholy, low-frequency moan of a foghorn, the early foghorns exhibit a surprisingly high-pitched sound like the honk of the bicycle horn from my first two-wheeler. So when you hear these sounds, you may say, this one sounds like this, or that one sounds like that. And I'm sure they do, but quiet your mind for just a moment and realize that over 100 years ago, someone on the very coast of Maine actually wound up, hand-pumped, or struck that object to create these sounds. This case contains the early foghorns. On the top shelf are 3 wooden box foghorns patented in 1901 by L.D. Lothrop. Born in Appleton, Maine, he later moved to Gloucester, Massachusetts, where he established the L.D. Lothrop Company to manufacture his foghorns. These foghorns were used on ships in foggy conditions. By pushing the lever back and forth on the wooden box, air fills the bellows inside the box, and here's some bellows here from inside the box, and blows the horn. The bottom shelf contains a Norwegian rotary foghorn, too fragile for me to record, with the bellows on the right. And next to the Norwegian foghorn is the little giant foghorn. And the metal cylinder foghorn works by pulling out the cylinder and then back in to create a sound. Oops. Here's a photo of curator Catherine Sear pushing the lever on a Lothrop foghorn to create the sound. Remember, the sound of these foghorns were surprisingly high-pitched. So here's the sound of the 3 Lothrop foghorns in succession, 4 blasts each. Next is the sound of the little giant foghorn. Once again, a big name for a small sound. Navigating the Kennebec River. The Kennebec River range lights guide mariners up and down the Kennebec River. On a cold winter day in March, I spoke with Mike Krendler, president of the Range Light Keepers. The river was relatively quiet that morning and wide like the ocean. Sound and ice from a late February storm lined the riverbanks and dotted the long boardwalks leading up to the Range Light Towers. The towers were small, snug, and cozy inside, and barely fit the 2 of us.
We just climbed the top of the front range light tower, and we're standing in front of the lantern that is flashing, and we're looking out the window over the Kennebec River, and we can see the flow of the water as it heads down towards the ocean. Interestingly, there's a second window in the top of this tower, and that window was a mystery for a long time. That window was placed only at the front range light tower so that the keeper residing in his quarters behind the tower could actually see that the light was operating without having to come out and open the tower.
Next, we stopped by at the nearby Fiddler's Reach fog signal.
We don't have a mechanical fog bell striker in place right now, but I can demonstrate what the bell sounds like using a block of wood. The characteristic for this fog signal was 2 strikes every 20 seconds. I'm just going to give you a 2-strike pattern for a demonstration.
Note how long it takes for the bell to reverberate and fade out. We stop hearing it long before the microphone does. And that bell is still going on. A wonderful note about the Kennebec Range Lights recording. I was aware that the bell striker was not in place before I arrived, so I wasn't expecting Mike to ring the bell. Instead, he not only rang the bell, but described the characteristic of the fog signal as 2 strikes every 20 seconds. Anyone else would have just picked up a block of wood and rung the bell. This is an example of the magic of recording both field sound and interviews. You come prepared, you have an idea of what you'll get, and then unexpectedly you receive more. Probably going to hear the toot toot again. Oh, here we go. All right. All the bells and whistles, I kept saying, when can I come and record all the bells and whistles? So we kept having this running joke between us. Pictured in the case are artifacts from the tugboat Seguin. Here is the sound of the engine room bell. Launched in 1884, the tugboat Seguin worked the Kennebec River and was the oldest steam-operated tugboat in Maine. The bell above the case is from the steamship Portland circa 1898. Also in the case from the tugboat Seguin, a brass hand-pumped whistle circa 1905, a paper stencil, a small drawing, and another bell from the Seguin. Here is the sound of the brass hand-pumped whistle. You have that nice little echo, as you're pulling that lever. Here's a closer look at 2 of the artifacts from the Seguin. After locating objects of interest from the museum's collection, I made a site visit to see the objects in person. I realized then that no object, no matter how plain or small, was insignificant. After we closed the doors to the collection, I imagined all the objects talking well into the night. Who would be chosen? I loved finding the paper stencil. How could something so small and from so long ago, a torn paper from the tugboat Seguin, have found its way to me, to you, and to the museum? The Minot Shipyard Bell. Curator Catherine Sear was my right-hand woman. Because I was not able to hear what these objects sounded like ahead of time, we spent much time making sure I recorded all the possible scenarios. I recorded the smaller objects first, then we moved to the basement to record the Minot Shipyard Bell. The bell was stored on a wooden dolly. The museum staff, now keenly aware of the quiet I needed to record, moved the bell to the painting storage area for a more insulated sound environment. What with the bell before me and the vintage ships all around me, surely I stepped back 100 years. to a time of wooden sailing ships and this very bell that summoned the shipyard workers to break for lunch or call it a day. Here's the sound of the Minot shipyard bell. Of course, the squeak from the Minot shipyard bell was the icing on the cake. That was a nice surprise. Harbors. I have recorded at many, many harbors. Although I have a windscreen for the microphone, which works most of the time, the wind is my nemesis, and yet I need the wind to rock the boats. Each harbor has its own distinct sound, rocked by the motion of water, the pull of the tide, and a variable touch of wind. The boats create a mesmerizing series of sounds. The sounds are introspective, both sharp and smooth, quiet and busy, rhythmic yet random, and to me, achingly beautiful. I have been listening to South Freeport Harbor for years. Finally, one September morning, as the wind blew a gale, I sat up among the boats and recorded. Although I had a windscreen, I sat on the dock with the boats on either side of me to help block the wind. Here's one of the many recordings I captured that day. Note the musical quality of the swell of the wind and the rocking of the boats. Isn't that beautiful? I have this thing for boats creaking at docks. I probably recorded for a couple hours at that dock. I record long enough to edit out all the unwanted sounds, like airplanes, people talking, trucks backing up, in order to still have enough good material to work with. And because sound is elusive, if I'm lucky, something unexpected may enter the recording, like this two-tone wind. Recorded the same day at South Freeport Harbor. I always record with headphones on, so that wonderful swell of the wind is amazing to hear because it's amplified from the microphone when you're recording. So the two-tone wind was a surprise. And another example of the elusiveness of sound is at Arcadia National Park, I explored the Schuylkill Peninsula and the small harbors of Korea, Winter Harbor, and Prospect Harbor for sound. When I located a whistle buoy at Schuylkill Point, the buoy sang loud and clear, but when I returned the next day to record, I could barely hear it. So I set up down by the water and captured this, the delicious sound of the incoming tide at Schuylkill Point. Looks like you got somebody to admit, Jeremy. Let's see. And finally, on a raw, misty afternoon, we moved outside on the museum grounds on the bank of the Kennebec River to record the Fiddler's Reach fog bell. Catherine rang the fog bell with such gusto that we didn't need to do 1,000 takes. Here's the sound of the fog bell. So the next time you visit a lighthouse, put down your camera and quiet your mind for just a moment and listen to the ever-changing beauty of sound. Jeremy, do we have some questions?
Thank you, Diane. That was great. Somebody posted a few minutes ago that the recordings are quite peaceful, and I certainly agree with that.
Thank you.
Especially, well, the bell, it all is really, but the bells and the sound of the tide and everything, it's very, very soothing. And the recordings are so pristine that it really brings you right there. And you mentioned the sound domes in the exhibit. I love those, where you stood under that dome, like plastic dome over you, and the sound, you're kind of immersed in the sound, and it really brings you right to, like, you're right there, hearing the bell outside or hearing the boats at the harbor or whatever it might be. So I hope you get another chance to have an installation with some of these sounds with the dome.
Thank you.
It's great. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat at this point. Okay. A question just popped up. By the way, Carl Zimmerman, who's with us, Diane, is a bell expert. And Carl posted when you played the Mine at Shipyard bell, he said, let me just admit somebody in the waiting room here. He said, there's Mine at Shipyard bell is bronze and appears to have been cast by Henry Hooper of Boston. And Carl, I don't know if you want to say anything at this point, but I know that from our emails lately, we've emailed back and forth, and you have a title to what you do that I've never heard before. I mentioned it to Dianne, campanologist. I think I have that right. Who is an expert on bells and the striking of bells. So, Carl, I will invite you if you want to now or at any point, if you want to say something verbally to Dianne and to everyone, you can click on raise hand, and I'll call on you to unmute your mic. But you can just don't, again, no pressure. You don't need to do that. But if you want to say something, go ahead and click on raise hand, and that actually goes for everybody. If you want to ask a question verbally rather than in the chat. On your Zoom controls down the bottom, right in the middle, you see a control that says raise hand. If you click on that, your name will pop to the top of our attendees list here, and I will call on you. You can unmute yourself. But let me go back to the chat here. Carl is posting the strike tones for each bell. Fiddler's Reach Fog Bell, strike tone G1, G number 1. Do you know what that means, Dianne?
I do not. And Carl, Jeremy told me that you may be coming, and I'm delighted to have you here. Perhaps we could touch base afterwards. I'm very interested in learning more about what you do.
He said the number refers to the octave. Okay. So, Janine asks, this is great. What mics are you using?
I use different mics for different purposes. So I am actually recording into a Nagra Aries P2 digital recorder. For the Kennebec River interview, I use the mono mic capsule. So that was a Nagra mic capsule for those recordings. I also have an Audio-Technica AT825 stereo mic, which I understand they don't make anymore. I absolutely love that mic, and that's my prime mic for all the outdoor field recordings that I do. And for the objects, actually, inside the museum's collection, I used a Neumann KMS 105 mic.
Mm-hmm. I wrote down a couple other things while you were speaking, Dianne, that occurred to me. One is when you played those old foghorns, and I just want to point out that those old foghorns in the museum's collection, I believe, are all horns that would have been sounded on boats. Is that correct?
Yes.
Rather than like from a light station or a lighthouse or something like that.
And what was wonderful was that I had a question as to where those were used, and we actually found a patent for one of the Lothrop foghorns, which we had in the exhibit. And under the description, he does describe them as being used on boats. And I'm assuming that because of the age of the foghorns, this is like circa 1900, that those bellows have dried up over time, and we are hearing perhaps a much different sound from what they originally would have sounded like.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask you that too, whether there was any fear that they might not survive being played after so many years.
Yeah, well, actually, the Norwegian rotary foghorn was not. I was not able to record that, so I'm assuming that if the foghorn was that dried up or fragile, that I wouldn't have been allowed to do that. in Catherine was great. You know, I did several different types of recording. I wanted to record with the microphone pointing at the lever when you pump the lever, and also straight on at a distance with the foghorn facing the mic. And so we did kind of run those old foghorns for quite a length of time. They did hold out.
Yeah, it struck me funny when you say you're about to play them, and you say the blasts of the horn. The word, I know that that's a word that's typically used to describe the sounding of a horn, 3 blasts every 30 seconds,
Yes.
whatever it might be. But
Right.
blast is kind of a funny word to use for those sounds, which,
Right.
sound like maybe a doggy toy being squeaked or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love hearing them, and the whistles
Yeah.
too.
And that, of course, the Lost and Found title of the exhibit, those objects were found sounds that weren't played for, maybe over 100 years or whatever. And they're kind of lost to us now. So that was kind of the theme of the exhibition as well.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go to a couple of questions in the chat, but another thing that occurred to me, you're talking about how some of the sounds remind you of other sounds. The bell buoy and the gong buoy, it's a certain kind of music. Especially the gong buoy reminded me of gamelan music, if you know what that is, like
Yeah.
Indonesian music
Yeah.
with these gongs and things. It just,
Yeah.
to me, it really sounded like that, and it's got its own beauty to it. Let's see. Phyllis commented, "I missed the deep-throated sound of the foghorn in San Francisco." Of course, the modern horns are different from the horns years ago, and somebody asked a question about that. We'll get to that in a moment. But even these modern electronic horns, I think, are quite beautiful. But they're fading out now because, as you said, Diane, they now use the MRAS system, the system where they're activated by mariners. And I find that people barely ever use them anymore, unless it's somebody demonstrating how the horn works by, like a Portland head, like we were saying, to turn it on for tourists or whatever. But they're not really used for navigation much anymore, so that's why you don't hear them much. Marcia said, "This is just what I needed on a wintry day." Diane, you put a lot of work into these recordings, and I appreciate you sharing them.
Thank you.
And Carl said, when I mentioned he's a campanologist, and he says, "Yes, I am a campanologist. See, I'm sorry, I have a little trouble seeing it. TWER bells, like twir bells, TWERbells.org." And I haven't looked at that yet, so I gotta check that out. Josh has a really good question. He says, the classic deep two-tone foghorn sound we're used to hearing in movies, is that a specific type of foghorn? Great presentation, by the way. And I'll say that the kind of horns he's referring to are like the old diaphone horns, which many years ago were steam driven and later driven by compressed air. And yeah, they had that rich, and when he says two tones, it would sort of drop off at the end, like that kind of a thing. There's a lot of recordings of those online, and there's a couple of them still playable in the UK. I know that, but they're pretty rare these days. But it's a beautiful old sound. If anybody saw the movie The Lighthouse, they had a very spooky foghorn. It was manipulated somewhat, but it had the feel of those old horns and that. So somebody was just asking me about diaphone horns in an email today. Yeah. So I think we've covered the questions in the chat. Again, I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to ask questions in the chat. Or to ask them verbally. If you want to ask something verbally, or make a comment, you can click on raise hand. Jeff, I don't know if you want to check in with anything at this point. No? Okay. All right. So Dianne, I want to give you a chance to say whatever more you would like to say at this point. I just have a few. Well, I know. Before we do that, before you will have definitely a chance to say, concluding remarks if you'd like, Dianne. But I just want to mention that the Maine Maritime Museum, where Dianne's exhibit was, is a great place to visit for anybody interested in maritime history. But for lighthouse fans, there's reasons to visit there, including an exhibit that's been there for several years now called Into the Lantern, a Lighthouse Experience. And it's actually a full-scale representation of the Cape Elizabeth two lights lighthouse tower, the East Tower lantern room, with the actual Fresnel lens, second-order Fresnel lens that used to be in the lighthouse. It's on display in this replica. And it has like a time-lapse giant video screen behind it that shows you the scene you would see from the lantern, but in time-lapse, like everything is moving very fast. And also some lighthouse exhibits around it and video screens and so forth. I just really quickly want to, I'll show you a couple of slides here so you can see what that looks like on my screen here. Okay. And hopefully you're all seeing this. And this is a video of the lens going around in that display. And of course, most of you are well aware of Fresnel lenses, the jewels of the lighthouse. I apologize for the fact that you can see the reflection of my hands holding the cell phone taking this video here, but it's really a nice exhibit. Dianne's sound exhibit was just across the hall from this exhibit, so I'm gonna.
Jeremy, we have a lot of really great resources on our website about the history of fog signals.
Good point.
Anything you possibly would want to know about fog signals, sound signals, buoys, markers, anything is on our website, and there's a lot of data on there. And also we have examples of the historic fog signals as well available if you want to hear recordings of the old-fashioned ones.
Right. No, I'm glad you pointed that out, Jeff. In fact, in my emails lately with Carl, who's here today, I think I pointed him to a couple of those articles. Wayne Wheeler, the founder of USLHS, did an article on the history of fog signals, a really comprehensive one in the Keeper's Log, the Society's journal.
Do you remember where in the website the recordings live? Are they in the light list, or are they in the catalog? Or
I don't believe in the light list in the research catalog. You can see a representation of the lights flash, the characteristic, but I don't think you hear any horns there. You have to give me.
I'll find the link to the examples of the historic foghorns, and also email everybody the link after the meeting.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
it's a deal. Yeah. So another thing I was just going to mention is that bell, the Fiddler's Reach fog bell on the grounds of the Maine Maritime Museum. Well, just to back up for a second, I just wanted to say that there's lots of reasons to visit the Maine Maritime Museum, that lantern exhibit. Also, they give lighthouse tours. They do boat tours on the Kennebec River in the summer. And it's a really nice way to see the lighthouses around there. And if you're interested in shipbuilding at all and maritime art and so forth, a lot of great stuff there. But I was going to mention the Fiddler's Reach fog bell on the grounds that you sounded for this. Is a typical lighthouse fog bell. I think typically they're a little over 1,000 pounds. I remember right, something like 1,048-pound bronze bells. We have one. I'm in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and at Portsmouth Harbor Light, the old fog bell is on display in front of the Coast Guard station there, where the lighthouse is. And when I used to give tours there, I would have a little rubber mallet and hit the bell so people could hear it. And the tone is very much like that bell. At the museum, and I know the bell, the Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse bell, I know was cast by the Blake Company in Boston, which I'm sure Carl is well aware of, and I think a lot of the lighthouse fog bells were made there. So let me see. A couple other things I want to mention before we close. I'm not seeing any more questions, but again, I want to give you a chance if you want to say anything more, Dianne, or not. But thank you so much for doing this presentation. Certainly and I think everybody really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's it's a real pleasure to be able to open people's ears to sound. I find that we kind of go to these beautiful places and, take photographs, but to actually take a moment to pause and put your phone away and whatever and listen. It really is an amazing experience to encompass, including the quiet as well. So that's what I'm sort of leaving everybody with, is to take a moment when you're next at one of these absolutely beautiful places and just pause and listen, because it's also the other thing I'm always struck by is that these places, lighthouses on the coast, these absolutely beautiful places are there for us always, all the time. And, only we have to go and, to be with them and experience them. It sounds almost cliche in a way to me, but I'm just struck every now and then that this absolute beauty is here always for us. So I do appreciate being able to talk to everybody here, because we are like spirits in what we really love. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dianne.
And Jeremy, I found the website link, so I posted it in the chat.
Oh, good.
If you go to the link, you scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there's about 15 different examples.
Okay. Glad you reminded me of that, because I'm not sure I've heard that in quite a while. I know something just occurred to me as you were just saying that, Dianne. I was thinking how we all value oral, ORAL history, and with the podcast I do for the Society, I think of it as an oral history project as well. And it's really important to save these memories of people and these interviews. But you're recording oral, AURAL history, which goes kind of hand in hand with oral history,
Right.
and not something we necessarily think about as much as we should, I think. So, again, Lost and Found, the name of your exhibit, you found these sounds, and now they're preserved thanks to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we wrap things up, I just want to mention there are some great U.S. Lighthouse Society tours coming up this year. There are tours in France, Australia, the Azores, domestic tours on the North Shore of Lake Superior, and Cape Cod and the islands. I'll be leading the Cape Cod tour along with Tina Hans, and I think we put a great tour together. That's in September, the 6th to the 13th. Check it out on the website, uslhs.org. Just click on tours, see all the details. We don't have any more of these events scheduled right now, but there's a couple interesting ones in the works, so just watch your notification emails and the USLHS Facebook page, et cetera, and the website itself. Again, uslhs.org. Reminder that the podcast that I host is now every other week, although in the off weeks I've been posting re-edited versions of old interviews. The podcast is Lighthearted, 2 words, and you can access it at uslhs.org or through any podcast app. Again, Lighthearted. And another reminder, if you're not, I know a lot of you already are, but if you're not a member of U.S. Lighthouse Society, please consider becoming a member. By doing that, you support events like this, you support preservation grants, the Passport program, which I know a lot of you are into, the Keeper's Log quarterly journal, the podcast, and again, these events and conferences and so forth. So, before we sign off, anything else, Jeff? Any other bits of business about the U.S. Lighthouse Society or anything?
Well, I mean, also just to add one more thing, when people support the society and join as members, it supports our grant program, which is huge.
I said that.
Really proud of. Yeah, you said that?
I did say that.
You said, well, I'm reiterating it.
Yeah. No, good.
But
Good. No, it is super important.
It's the only lighthouse grant program that's solely dedicated to lighthouses in the country. And every more and more we build that fund, the more money we can give away every year.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you reiterated that. So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
thank you very much, Diane. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So with that, thanks again to Dianne Ballon. Thank you all again for attending today. See you next time we do one of these, and keep a good light. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.